If I can get a card out of my hand into a partner's hand, there's no get ready. You don't move till you move.
Right.
It's palmed into my right hand.
Right.
Cap it on the bottom of the deck. Burn 1, 2, and sell it out.
And there's our ace.
And there's the ace.
Hey YouTube. This looks a little bit different. How's the focus? Yeah, alright, cool. I decided to upgrade the channel. So we are now recording on a Sony a7S III, which is a borderline cinema camera that I've owned for a good long while, but I've strictly been using for B-roll because it has a whole bunch of settings that I don't really know how to use. But I figured the only way to get better at it is to start using it. Plus, I figure you guys deserve the best video that I can give you. Anyway, this isn't a camera channel. This is a magic channel, so let's move on. Last week, we talked about the difference between gambling sleight of hand and the sleight of hand that's used in Magic, and how in general they are not the same thing for a number of reasons. If you guys didn't get the chance to review that video, you'll find a link right up there. Now, here's the thing. Ron is about to move fast and furious through a lot of concepts all at once. And I gave you guys homework in the last video that I'm hoping you got the chance to review so that way you have a baseline for what he's talking about. But there is one concept that I didn't go over in the last video or give you any homework because I wanted to teach it to you now. And that is the idea of a brief. No other concept in card magic has had more of an effect on the way that I handle a deck of cards and control it than the idea of a brief, and no one has taught me more about that concept than Ron. See, here's the thing about brief work, and it's why I sing its praises nearly everywhere that I go. It's subtle, it's dependable, and it happens on the fly. It's impromptu. It makes you far less dependent on the gimmicks and crimps that you would normally have to use to control a deck of cards, either in the shuffle or in the cut. So, do me a favor, grab a deck of cards, and let's go over the basic concept so that way when Ron starts talking about it, you've got a baseline for this one too. Okay, so just to clarify a little bit of terminology, a brief is essentially a small outcropping of cards that you set, control, and utilize to find your way back to the important part of the deck. Sometimes the important part is the brief itself, and sometimes that brief is just acting as a bookmark to get you back to the part of the deck you really care about. Now in gambling sleight of hand, brief work encapsulates a lot of different ideas that would normally be expressed as their own unique ideas in Magic, and one of those is the idea of a jog. A single card protruding from the deck. This is probably the most familiar bookmark concept that magicians have when dealing with card control. The next slightly more advanced concept is the idea of a step, a misalignment of packets in the deck. And it doesn't matter whether those packets are squared or smeared, as long as you can maintain that misalignment, you can utilize the shelf, the difference in that alignment, to find your way back home. A brief is a weird amalgam of those two things while still being its own unique idea. It's a smearing of cards rather than being a unique object unto itself, and it tends to happen in the motion of something rather than the position. The cool part is that you could have a deck in front of you with all three of these things, a jog, a step, and a brief, all being unique objects while still roughly doing the same thing, helping you find your way back to the important part of the deck. So let's go over how you would set a brief in the cutting of the cards and then how you would utilize it to find your way back home. Okay, so here we go. Take the deck, put it in front of you, and turn over the top card. That top card is home. This is the one that you need to find after you've set the brief. Now, if you're going to set a brief in the act of cutting, you've got three places that you could do it. You could either do it before the cut, after the cut, or during the cut. So if I did it before the cut, it means that I would have to smear the bottom of the deck and then try to maintain that smear in the act of cutting so that way I don't lose my place in the deck, and if I lifted there, I would find that face-up card. If I wanted to do it after the cut is finished, it means that when I finish the cut, I would have to create a step, a misalignment of those packets, so when I align everything, it creates a small brief right there, so if I lifted there, there's home. But the one that is probably the most powerful, because it's one single motion, it's setting the brief in the act of cutting the deck. And this is the one I really want you to get good at. So here's what you do. Take the deck, lift and cut the top packet off and set it down. And before you take this packet and perfectly align it with the original top of the deck, what you're going to do is allow the bottom card to smear along this outside corner of the original top of the deck. And then you release some of the pressure on the outside long end of the deck, and you allow those cards to smear out at a diagonal. Here's what that looks like. And that's obscenely large, right? But it's for illustration purposes. If I were to fix, right, align all three of these sides and not touch this side, because this side is protected by this hand, I get my brief. right? And it's covered by the hand that did the original holding of that packet. So now I have a protected brief, but it's in a weird place for the act of cutting back home, because I can't just lift like that, right? And more importantly, it would be even weirder if I were to turn the deck and then cut with the opposite hand. So what I'm going to do is shove that brief into a position that is self-similar to the original cut that set the brief in the first place. And I'm going to do that by only applying pressure to the outside corners of the deck. So I'll do this facing the camera as if you were the magician here. If this was the original outside of the deck facing the audience, if I just tap those corners, what you'll notice is that the card is now protruding here, but it's also protruding there. And if I were to lift at that protrusion, there's my face-up card. So if I were doing that except protected from my side, I'd set the brief and then I would align it, and now I've got my brief on my side of things and at the thumb that I normally do for the lifting and the cutting action. Now, if you want to cut a brief, you got to be careful because you don't want to push it into the deck. So the way that you maintain this is you plant, right? You press down with the first finger of the hand that's going to do the cutting, and that keeps you from pushing that brief in with your thumb so that you can lift, and now you're back home. So now here is the practice. Take that card, turn it face up, and then you set a brief. And now, with the new top of the deck, turn over that card. And now your job is to perpetually cut face-up cards and then set a brief as you finish the cut. So I'm going to knock this brief over toward this thumb and then cut a face-up card, but I'm going to set another brief. And my job is to keep cutting face-up cards over and over again. And your job is to eventually learn to do this blind. You don't want to have to look down at your hands. You want to be able to trust what you feel and control those cards so that eventually you can control it to whichever part of the deck you need. In this case, I'm just going to put them right next to each other so that I've officially controlled my two cards. But that's from a magic point of view, right? That's if I'm just doing this for myself. In the gambling world, what you do is very much controlled by the rules of play. And like in poker, you don't do your own cutting. So how do you utilize a brief so that someone you're working with could use it and not be obvious about it? See, now we need to bring in Ron. So for the first time on YouTube, allow me to introduce Ron Conley and the moving brief.
The moving brief is something that's mentioned in the 4-day book, and I don't think people understand the context of it. But it was meant for a specific scenario. So we have a short-handed poker game. My cutter is going to be over here, across the table, and the spectator is going to be here. And we don't want the spectator to see the brief sticking out going across the table, so it doesn't come out till it gets over to where the cutter is. So here's the 4 kings, and basically this is what's going to happen is the brief is on the short ends. It's covered with the fingers, thumb back here, and the pinky is going to rest against it and push when it's ready to come out. So when it comes across the table, the pinky pushes, brief comes out, and we got the 4 kings, and it was out of the spectator's view. Now I'll show you a scenario of how it might happen in a game. So we got shuffle, shuffle. On the 3rd shuffle, I'm going to set a brief. Okay, now we come across the table, stick the brief out, it can get cut, and we got the 4 kings on top. It's one of those things that magicians like because you have this, you know, in this case it's the 4 diamond, 4 spades, but and this card almost magically pops out of the deck. It's sort of cool.
See what I mean? Ron is a weird wealth of knowledge in an area of card handling that most card magicians, including myself, are almost entirely ignorant of. But both he and I realize that a moving brief might be a little difficult for the average magician to apply because most card magicians don't use partners when we perform. And for his premiere on YouTube, he really wanted to give you guys something that you could use. But he's also a big believer in not dumbing down the good stuff for the sake of ease. So, he's about to blitz through some pretty advanced concepts in card control, and it's why I gave you guys homework in the last video, was to try to prep you for this part. So I hope you guys did your homework. But without any further ado, allow me to reintroduce Ron Conley and one of his favorite top stock controls.
Okay, here is the first false strip out I ever used, and this is like about 1970. So I got the 4 kings on top, and I was taught to just do a triple cut. So you just do 3 cuts, you have a break in the back, and the kings just go around in a circle to the top again. Just a little bit later, I started doing it like this, where now I'm stripping to that break. Okay, and you got the 4 kings there. Then I saw this strip out. I guess this is in Erdnase. And then there's a strip out that I've only seen one person do right, and that was Steve Forte. But what it is you strip from the bottom down. And I mean, I'll try it. And this is a full deck. And that's a bottom down strip. If these had been suited, they'd still be suited. But you're just going like this. As long as you keep your tempo, your motion, it can look okay. I mean, I fooled people with that. But Steve Forte could do this at a level that I don't think is ever going to be duplicated. Okay, here's sort of an interesting move. Stock control, the 4 kings. Shuffle, shuffle, strip, shuffle. You know, it's regular casino procedure. Let me go through it once. So there's your shuffle, shuffle. Here's the strip. Square everything up. One last riffle, and we have the 4 kings retained on the top of the deck. Okay, here's an explanation on what I was doing. This is a block transfer shuffle. They got the 4 kings on top, and I'm going to shuffle 1 on top of these cards and then strip them all back out. I'm going to strip the whole deck back out. So it's a block transfer in combination with a pull-out shuffle. So I got the 1 over. It transfers over. It's now on this side. I got a little bit of a V. And now I straighten out that V, pull these cards, and do a riffle and shuffle that card into the other 3. You can shuffle it on top and retain the full order, but I think it looks best to shuffle it into the other 3, preferably between the first and second card. And that gives you the 4 kings on top. Now I'm going to do the strip out, which I really like. The first strip is out of the center. So I want to get like half a deck. Strip from the center, then where the kings are, then a little bit of a jog here, and strip off to the top. Square up here. I come in with my pinky, push those in. You can see it come in the back. That's where I can now square, lift up. I got the 4 kings here, and it's just a shuffle over. So you retain the 4 kings on top.
And there you go. That's Ron Conley and his debut on YouTube. So I hope that the brief work, and more especially that stock control he just showed you, give you guys something to practice and something to strive for. And that's just a fraction of what this man has taught me after all these years of friendship, so I can't thank him enough for coming on this channel. Anyway, just like every other person who has guest starred on this channel, I got the chance to interview Ron, and we got to talk about some of the deeper concepts and differences between gambling and magic. So if you guys want to hear a little bit more from him, just go ahead and check the link in the description below. And if you find yourself especially interested in this gambling style sleight of hand, normally the references would be pretty few and far between, at least the good ones. But you happen to live in a world where one of the best and most comprehensive references is still in print and available. It's called Gambling Sleight of Hand by Steve Forte. It's a massive 2-volume set of books, and you'll find a lot of Ron in those pages. But I gotta warn you, it is obscenely expensive for the dabbler, but for the serious student, there is no better bargain. It's worth every single penny. So if you are very, very interested in it, it's worth it. Anyway, in the meantime, I'll see you guys soon.